And welcome back. And you're with this week's edition of Bias Magazine, and in the studio this week I have the wonderful and brilliant Juliet Gilkes Romero, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So we've got you here this week because I'm so excited about the work and stuff that you do. But before we get to that, let's talk about who Juliet is. Who is Juliet? Where have you been and what sort of brought you to here? You're a playwright, and what else are you?
Okay. Well, I'm a journalist, and I've been working in international news for many years. My particular fascination has always been the Afro-Latin diaspora, African diaspora, Caribbean affairs. I started out in local radio, in BBC local radio, and then I joined World Service, where I was fortunate enough to be able to travel to places like Ethiopia and Cuba and Haiti and make documentaries and learn about people and learn about things that affect their lives. I'm passionate about telling people stories. And also I wanted to see more black journalists on the screen, to be honest, and you know, that's what kind of inspired me from a young age.
Okay. So from doing journalism as a job, what inspired you to then go into writing and being a writer specifically?
I think it was the writing, the wanting to tell stories that led me into journalism, because I started writing stories from a very young age. I mean, I remember when I was 7 and 8, you know, annoying my parents with my stories, which I insisted on performing in front of them and stuff like that. And I kind of formalised that by becoming a journalist. And then I got to a stage where actually I felt, and with the onset of 24-hour news, and there was a loss of funding in things we could do. I worked in radio, which was cheaper, so we could go out and make documentaries, but TV production became a lot more expensive, and I felt creatively frustrated. So I decided to do an MA in writing for performance so that I could meet other writers and learn how to write for theatre. So I thought, well, I'll have a go, I'll take a course. And began playwriting as part of that process and try to use the stories that I'd seen from abroad, and as a result of covering news and current affairs within that kind of sphere.
Okay, so Gates of Gaza, your stage play, was that your first one? Yeah.
It was.
Okay.
I wrote it for my MA.
Yeah. Oh.
Yes. I actually wrote it for the MA and researched it during that time, and it was a very raw piece of writing. And I remember being matched with a director who said that I wrote like a documentary maker, and that I had to learn.
Compliments.
Wow, not quite. I mean,
Okay.
what I had to learn was character and how to really dramatise those stories and bring them alive, so they weren't kind of like, didn't operate like a TV documentary, but you know, a kind of drama that really sucked people into, you know, the action and live. So it was double-edged, but I learned a lot from her. And as a result of writing the play, they, you know, at the end of the MA, they invited an audience. It was performed at RADA, and they invited people from the National Theatre and from the Tricycle Theatre. And fortunately, you know, I was then invited onto various writers' groups and got an attachment at the National Theatre. That was in 2000. Well, I finished the MA in 2001, but the play, as you know, actually didn't get into production until 2008, so it was a long process.
A long piece.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the play. What was it? Gates of Gaza. What was the storyline of that?
Right. And fitting to be able to talk about this subject really is because it was about First World War troops. It was about the West Indians who fought for the British Empire in the First World War. I'm fascinated by untold stories. When I studied history, all I learnt about was the Atlantic slave trade, and I'm sure you know the history book. You know, it's that diagram with the inside of the boat and the black figures lined up.
Always.
And that was it. And you know, as I began to research for my MA and I'd chosen this topic, I'd already met a black actor called Earl Cameron, who, when he was 17, came to Britain on the eve of the Second World War in 1939. And when we were chatting, he was telling me about the First World War veterans that he met, who helped him. They took him to Soho, took him to West Indian restaurants in Soho in 1939. Wow. And he said these guys were tough, and that they had been veterans of the First World War. That led me into more and more research at the Imperial War Museum, and I discovered this amazing history, These men volunteered, 16,000 of them volunteered.
16,000.
Fought in what was Palestine, won medals for bravery. And where will you find that?
In the history.
No.
And that number, all from the West Indies?
Yes,
Wow.
yeah. And, you know, I'm passionate about telling untold stories. And I think it's Toni Morrison who said that, you know, if there's a story that you really want to tell and no one's done it yet, you have to do it.
You have to do it, yes. Yeah. So you've also, as well as that, you've done a radio play.
Yes.
One Hot Summer,
That's
was that
right.
called?
Yes.
So just quickly summarise that plot.
Okay.
It was about Liverpool riots, was it?
Yes,
yeah.
it followed At the Gates of Gaza. It was about what happened to these men when they were demobilised after the First World War. You know, the British Army agreed to, or the British government agreed to create the British West Indies Regiment. They brought them over, trained them, sent them to the front, but they forgot about them when they were demobilised. They couldn't get home. They couldn't get jobs. A lot of them were destitute. They couldn't get any benefits. Britain was bankrupt as a result of the war. People fight. There were riots, and unfortunately, they had to fight. To survive. And the riots took off in Liverpool, Cardiff, Newcastle, Glasgow, London. So that was an extension. Not only did they fight for king and country, they then had to fight for their survival and self-respect.
Okay, so moving on now to the piece I want to get into, your new play, Upper Cut. Tell us about that, because that's something not totally different, but slightly different.
Yes, it was a different process. I was invited to write a play about the fight for black parliamentary representation by an actress called Emma Dennis Edwards and a theatre director called Lottie Wakeham. They had been on an exchange, an Old Vic New Voices exchange to New York. They were talking to a lot of the black American actors and performers that they met about politics in the States. And then this led them to want to do an inquiry about what was happening in Britain. So Lottie read Gaza. She brought me to meet Emma, and we decided to workshop ideas. So we looked at the history of black politics in this country. And all of the characters that we researched were men. Wow. So at the end of this process, we talked, and I decided, actually, I really want to write a piece about the fight for representation, but seen through a woman's eyes. And I created this character called Karen, who, it's her journey and how she fights for to become an MP in Britain. Okay. It's a three-hander. It's a love story. It's about passion, politics, and power, and what people do to achieve their aims in that. Yes.
Okay.
Very ferocious
and that's
mix.
showing at the Southwark Playhouse.
That's correct.
Okay, and we've got the dates here: 14th of January to the 7th of February.
Yes.
And what we'll do is we'll title the where to get the tickets from.
Yes.
But I wanted to talk as well about the awards, because as you're such a great writer, you've received some quite good awards, haven't you?
Wow. For At the Gates of Gaza, I won the Writers Guild for Best Play.
Well done.
2009.
Yeah.
And that was something. I mean, I was nominated with other plays that had opened at the Bush Theatre in London, the National Theatre. Gaza toured regionally, opened at the Birmingham Rep, did a fantastic tour regionally, was never shown in London. So I went along not expecting to win. They showed a wonderful montage of pictures from, the play. And then my name was announced, and it was just unbelievable.
It's surreal.
And Steve McQueen was there because he'd won for his film about the Maze prisoners, and he came up and he shook my hand afterwards. And if I'd had my mobile phone, if I'd been thinking, it would have been a selfie moment.
Oh wow, wonderful, wonderful. So what's next for you? I mean, can you give us a little sneak as to what you're working on now?
Right. I'm working on a musical.
Okay.
With the wonderful Tim Sutton, who's the musical director of Memphis the Musical, in which Beverly Knight is starring. I can't say much more than that.
But but you've given us a little snippet, which is good, good. And I also wanted to mention that Gates of Gaza is going into a book now.
Yes.
Can we mention that?
Yes. Oberon Publishers, they will be publishing Upper Cut and At
Upper
the
Cut
Gates.
as well?
Yes,
Wow.
both of them. And the hope is that Gaza will be performed in London. And I think it's, once it's published, that's much easier. Unfortunately, it wasn't published at the time, but Oberon have stepped in. As you know, it's a centenary of the First World War, and they thought it was a fitting tribute to the black soldiers who fought in the First World War to do this.
Well, Juliet, you do such great work, but if the audience want to contact you, I know they can probably follow you on Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah, so can you give your hashtag or whatever we call it these days for people to follow you and so on?
It's at Tell Juliet, and that's on Twitter.
That's on Twitter.
Yes.
And is there any other way people can contact you?
They can contact me through my agent.
Yeah.
And that's also on my Twitter page.
On your Twitter page, lovely. Yes. Okay, well, Juliet, I want to thank you so much for the great work that you do. And I don't even need to say good luck. The play's going to be great and everything that goes on. So thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Shell. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we'll go back to Lavina in the studio. Thank you.